Hey, look at me when I'm talking to you. It's better. See, that joke's funny because it's not only conceptually funny, but it's practical too. So, kids, how are you doing today? Are you familiar with the idea of checking if your camera is recording? So, kids, how are you doing today? Are you familiar with the idea of a guarantor, a cosigner, someone who basically comes along and says, witnesses, says this is this legit, this happened, this is a thing, and I understand that. If you're not familiar, I'll do a brief explanation to get into it. When you go to rent somewhere, when you go to buy somewhere, when you go to do something which is legally binding, generally you have to have somebody else sign to say and witness and say this happened. Right? When you go get married, usually you get married, there is a public figure, priest, government, whatever you have, and you have the people actually involved in the marriage, and then you have the witnesses. This is why in Vegas you can make money being a witness at random weddings, and it is because you require someone else to say yes, this is fine, I don't object to this, they seem to know what they're doing. Doesn't matter if they're dressed as Elvis, doesn't matter if they're wasted, doesn't matter if they are accepting themselves into a situation which they didn't really fully understand or appreciate at the time. That's just how that works. When you rent somewhere, when you go to rent somewhere in the UK, if your credit isn't amazing, and maybe this is the first time you're getting a place, you're required to have what's called a guarantor. A guarantor is usually a parent or institution which signs alongside with you, and all that really says is, hey, if this person can't make rent 1 month, with a guarantor, with a financial guarantee that they're still legitimate, they're just struggling for a month, so you can take us to court if needs be. That's how that works. And the same with like a co-signer, anything like that. When I moved to the US, I had this. If you don't know, fun fact for you, credit does not travel worldwide. So despite the fact that I'd lived into the same place over a decade in the UK, had very good credit in the UK, I don't know what my credit in the UK is right now, but I assume it's doing okay because I haven't really done anything with it. You basically get into a situation of moving to another country where your credit is zero. So even though I had a full-time job, I was going to be paid reasonably well, and I was going to be able to make savings and move into somewhere and have a deposit and all these kinds of things. In the eyes of the credit system, which is reliant within the US, didn't exist. So I applied to a couple of companies which act as a co-signer. They act as your guarantor to say, hey, if this person gets into financial trouble, we'll take the flak. They will owe us, they won't owe you. We can reimburse you for the however many thousands of dollars which you needed to move in the first place. So that's how that systems work. Now, are you also familiar with what is called a wingman or hype person? You may understand there's the context of this. The title may give it all away, but a wingman or a hype person is someone who goes out with you on a social situation or a job situation or anything which requires some level of courage. And yes, social situations do require courage. They go out and they say, hey, you got this, man. You got this. You can do this. You can go talk to that person you find attractive at the end of the bar. I'll help. I'll wingman you. I will help situation, and I will help that out. I assume there is a female equivalent, a wing woman, as it were, and I'm assuming there's a non-binary wing person to help you through these things. And they're kind of like, I guess the term is a co-pilot. It's someone there to help and say, hey, this is gonna be okay. We're gonna make it through this situation. You are the best person I know for this moment right now. And I think that's wonderful. It can go drastically wrong. They could be doing a bad job. They could be, in a situation which isn't suited to them, and they're still hyping them up and saying, let's go. You see this a lot on YouTube. You see this a lot in various social peer pressure situations where people are hyping people up and going, yeah, this is going to be great. This is going to be great. The prime example of that is videos of people jumping off roofs and into pools and it going drastically wrong. Whereas somebody should have said, hey, buddy, this is a bad idea. Don't do it. come back inside. No one will think less of you. Let's have a drink. You do not need to jump off that roof because you're going to miss the pool and will no longer have ankles. If you know somebody who's this kind of person, send them this clip. Anyway, back to my point. But these things can go wrong, obviously. Now, why do I bring this up? Why do I think about this? Am I looking for a cosigner? No. Am I looking for a hype man? Sometimes. But the reason I bring this up is because I think I have this context within my head of, I get asked the question quite a lot of, how do you do all this, Graham? What's your secret? Where are you going with this? Why do you sound like you're in the 1940s? Now, all of this kind of adds together and you say, okay, well, how do I keep going this? I keep going this just because I've said it before. I'm compulsively creative. It's things which I do and I can't help myself but do things and play with things and enjoy the novelty of life in its wider world and its wider sense. And that's why I keep creating things. And I heavily believe in encouraging others to do the same. And I think I've said this before. I do not mean everyone in the world needs to be a fine artist. I do not mean that everyone in the world needs to go out and start doing paintings and sculptures and dedicate their lives to creation. I don't think that. What I do encourage is that creation is a fundamentally healthy way to deal with a lot of things in your life, and in creating something you get to exercise that part of your brain which is problem solving, logic and empathy of the wider world all at the same time. Can you hear that? And I think I was reminded of this the other day. So I went to an event in Jersey City, which if you don't know is just across the river from New York, called Drink and Draw, and I took 2 friends with me, people I work with as well, but they were, it was valuable. It was valuable for all 3 of us. I think it was valuable to go to a social situation, which allowed us to do something other than drink, and just exercise that part of our brains. The people I went with are extremely creative, extremely valuable individuals and people, and have their own personal views and tastes of what's going on in the world. But we went to this drawing event, and we got to meet people who drew, and that was great, and it was comforting. And I know for myself, that's kind of, scary. It's scary to go do something like that, because being in a public social setting creating is quite scary for me personally, and going to something where I don't know anybody, having 2 friends with me made it all the better. It made it much simpler for me to go, because I knew regardless of what happened, I'd just be able to have a chat with them, even if I didn't find myself able to just approach strangers and say, hey, how you doing? What are you drawing? Tell me about yourself. I knew I'd have that little safety net. And I think the reason I bring that up and was reminded of it is that I think through most of my life, I've said the word think too many times, I think through most of my life, I've always been that person to encourage other people to create, right? And it flashed back to a memory. I'm going to go way back. So when I was year 11 at school, I think you're about 15, 16 years old in the UK when you're in year 11. We were doing art, and we were doing our art finals and studying for our final exams and all this kind of stuff. And I finished my work. Right, I finished my sketchbook work. I had a plan for what I was going to do in the exam, and I was pretty far ahead in it because it's something I enjoyed doing. So I was doing it in my entire free time, and then every opportunity I got, I was doing it in my work and school time. So I was looking at it and going, well, I'm done. What can I do? And I remember a guy in my class called James. James was extremely creative. Extremely happy to be creative, and it bugs me that I don't know his last name. James, I know you'll probably never see this, but shout out to you. We were in the same class together, and so my teacher just said, hey, can you help James? He's struggling with what to put into the sketchbook. He's struggling in class, and he was, and I could see that. And so I spent the next 3 or 4 classes just talking to him and saying, hey, okay, well, you could do this. Why not explore this? Why not do this idea? Why not engage with this idea? And he did that, and he came through, and I can't remember what grade he got, but I know he passed, and I was pretty happy about that, and James was pretty happy about that. I thought, this is great, because I've taken someone who has all the ideas and the thought and the wherewithal to want to do these things, but is struggling because he's watching other people who are doing this kind of naturally, who are doing this all the time, not knowing that the only reason I can do that naturally is because I spent most of my life just drawing and creating, right? And James was great. He tried to invite me to things, but being the antisocial person I was at 16, I wasn't interested. And that's, a regret in my life. But I continued that into university. Every time I sat down with people in university, I was saying to people, hey, you've got this idea. And they're like, yeah, but I'm not sure about it. I'm like, oh, we've got this project coming. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do for it. I don't know what the idea is. I don't know if this is a good idea. Is this a good idea? And they'd ask me, and I'm thinking, well, I can't tell you if it's a good idea because, as I've discussed recently in my, how to draw perspective video, I can't tell you what gives you the cathartic response which you require from art. I can't, and that's how I create all my art. I don't care if it fulfills the brief. I don't care if it meets all the requirements of the project brief and set down which was set there, because it needs to make me feel fulfilled in order for me to want to create and ultimately engage with creating to actually get something out of me in the first place. So I took to university and we were doing this, and every time I'd sit down with people and say, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to have this whole situation, what are you doing? And then they'd tell me things, and I'd give them 2 or 3 different just viewpoints on their idea, not criticisms, nothing like that, just suggestions. And then each time they'd run away and be like, yeah, oh no, that's right, that's great, I can move on with this idea. I didn't do anything. I'm just pointing this out, right? I didn't do anything. All I did was just encourage their initial idea, encourage it to be slightly more than it is, encourage it to get past that initial hurdle so that they had confidence in it, because I'd co-opted it. I'd co-opted and co-signed it to say, hey, this is actually good. I like this. Conceptually it works, and you can involve this, and this, and it builds upon that layer. It lays upon that foundation and says to you, yeah, you know what? You do have a good foundation here. You can build something bigger than yourself and bigger than the work that you wanted to create. And all you needed was someone random to say, hey, yeah, it's a pretty good idea. Why not give it a go? What are you going to lose? You got nothing to lose. In uni, I did it a few times, and I think Mikey, who was on our course, Mikey, shout out, you're awesome. He had an idea for his final piece. He couldn't figure out how to make it unique. He couldn't figure out what he wanted to do with it. He had just had some thought, and I just suggested that he build a model, right? He build a viewing model, which would mean that his work would be displayed through a window, so you're viewing the images within a frame within a frame. The whole idea was the images themselves were kind of voyeuristic, and I said this would make it engaging. It would make it mean that the audience have to go up and they view it, and it adds to the concept. It doesn't remove from the concept by being distracting. And he did it for his final, and he got it through. And I was like, yes, great, fantastic. Why do I bring this up? Recently, we did Scunthorpe Zine Fest again. We did it again. 2nd year we've done it. And it's become incredibly important to me that I keep this going, incredibly important to me to push that kind of event out into the world. And why do I do it? Am I wanting, and I think this is maybe something which I'm just conflicting with in my brain, is I get the worry or the concern that people look at it and they say to themselves, the only reason that anyone would do this, the only reason anyone would start a podcast, the only reason anyone would put themselves in a position where they have pedestal over someone else because it's their event, they're organizing it, they're working. I mean, I'm working with 2 great people and we're putting this together, is why would you do that? Why would you put time and effort into something like that? And for most people, the reason they would do that is to give themselves a platform, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's, if anything, the history of DIY art is, I can't get into any of these venues, fuck it, I'm going to build my own venue. I can't get into these competitions, fuck it, I'll run my own competition. No magazine will employ me, screw it, I will make my own magazine, and then that becomes hugely successful and popular and all that kind of stuff. And really, for me, none of that has been the idea. If anything, I do everything I can to remove myself from these events. Scunny Zine Fest is pretty damn easy to remove from the event because I live in a different country. But that's why the event is there. The event isn't there to give me a platform. The event isn't there to give me any, pedestal to stand on and spit my ideas into the world. The only idea I'm really trying to spit into the world is one of encouragement. It is one of saying to a large group of people on a large platform, saying, hey, come look at this stuff, right? Come look at this viewpoint of art and creation and catharsis, and say to yourself, is what I really want to make much different to this? Is what I really want to do a change from any of this? Or is it similar? Is it something which I could do? I think it's crazy to me when people go to museums and they say to themselves, yeah, but anyone could make this. And I'm thinking, okay. On one hand, I know that statement comes from people suggesting that it's simple, right? People suggesting that what is on canvas, what is on paper, what is in front of them is simple in a physical manifestation to create, right? That's what they're suggesting. That's what they're suggesting at a base level. But to me, it also speaks to a large amount of insecurity that they didn't think to make it, or they did think to make it, but they were unwilling to just put that pen to paper in the first place. Anyone could make this, or my kid could make that. Roots down less to kind of anger or hatred or disgust at something which maybe they don't understand, and more to just frustration with themselves that maybe they had a period in life where they were discouraged from doing things like this, and maybe they had a period in life where they don't have this kind of outlet. They don't have the means and mental wherewithal to go do that because they never had a co-signer. They never had someone to say, hey, it's fucking okay. Right? Speaking of Drink and Draw, I went to Drink and Draw with two friends of mine, Abra, Tristan. Shout out to you guys. No idea if either of you will watch this, but I was having this conversation with Abra, and we were talking about kind of perfectionism in creation and how that can limit what you want to create. And I think this is true. I think this is true so much and so often, especially when people are learning to draw, is that they will try to do things in a very exact manner, and they get frustrated that they can't translate what's in their head to the paper in a clean manner, because they see anything which isn't clean as mistakes, and therefore mistakes need to be erased, and then it suddenly gets more complex because you're using an eraser and you're going to damage the paper and undo the work which you've done. And I said to him, well, I was always taught that when you draw, you should overdraw, right? You should draw a line. If that line doesn't work, you draw another line. You don't erase the previous one. You just draw it on top, and you just keep going, and you keep getting that rhythm, and you keep saying to yourself, yep, I'm going to keep drawing these lines until eventually the shading takes shape to build you the line which you want. You've created in the layer, and you're working through. And well, not only have you done the work to draw in the line that you wanted, you've just created muscle memory. You created muscle memory, so the next time you do it, your hand's going to repeat it. You're going to repeat that line, and you're going to create the over thing. But people are so worried about making that initial mistake, they never even get to that stage. Whereas it's just, I'm there and just saying, hey, it's okay if this is messy. It's okay if this is, imperfect. It's okay if it's not exactly as you picture in your head, because you can build it into something else. And when you build into something else, next time you'll be like, okay, well, that's how I built that. How can I build the thing which I actually want to build inside my head? I think there's a lot more value in co-signing concepts than anything else in the art industry or the art world or the creative world and the catharsis world, the catharsis industry, as you may want to call it, right? There's more value in that than actually teaching people techniques. Creating safe creation spaces is so much more important, because you're creating co-signer spaces, you're creating hype spaces, you're creating spaces where people didn't have a bubble to say, you could be good at this, this could be a good idea, right? This could be something which you like, you enjoy, and you can explore. And I know everyone has their friendship bubbles. Everyone has their little bubbles and says, hey, you're great at this. You can sing. And maybe you can't sing. And your friends are all telling you can sing. And that's different. That's different. They're not encouraging you to improve. They're not encouraging you to grow. They're encouraging you to keep going, right? I'm encouraging the idea that not only is this a space where you can say to people, hey, you can sing, but also explore some different techniques, explore some different ideas within your voice. Because right now what you have is great and we love it. But if you only ever do that, we're probably the only people who might love it. You're not small potatoes. You can get bigger. You can be big potatoes in the world, right? I think, outside of all of this, with the way systems and governments are going, and the way money is being viewed within the world, and consistency of things within the world, you're only going to have situations more so where having environments where people do feel comfortable to express themselves is going to become ever more valuable. And that's my encouragement to you. My encouragement to you is not, hey, go out, spend your money, put on these events, do these things, and put yourself destitute in order to provide some people a place to sketch. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. Because one, that's not feasible. The only reason I can get away with it is because I'm ridiculous. Two, it's not sustainable because too many of those things will mean they end up just being co-opted, paywalled in the same way anything else which is successful will. My encouragement to you is find people within your life, if you are someone who wants to try something, who will say, hey, let's give it a go. Bring me something. Show me something. Show me something which you want to make. And I'll listen to it. I'll read it. I'll look at it. And then offer you some feedback. Good or bad. And they're your friends. They're trusted people. They're not going to turn around and go, dude, this is shit. No. They're going to turn around and be like, here's what I liked about it. Here's what I didn't like about it. And I'm just an individual, so maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why I don't like it, and maybe I do like it. But having that conversation, having that safe space is the key. And the more you can attend those spaces, the more you push that into your work, the more other people push that into their work. And when someone brings you something, and they bring you something they've made, or an idea they've had, don't just dismiss it. Don't just dismiss it and say, that is never going to work. That's just stupid. Nobody is going to want to watch that. Because where does that leave anybody? It leaves no one making anything because the first thing you did was harpoon their idea. The value isn't in the skills that you can teach or the platforms you can give anybody. It is the agreement that you have between one another that is that if someone brings you something or someone wants to try something, that you'll at least listen to the idea. And then when someone gives you feedback, you'll engage with that feedback. And it's okay to say, hey, the thing you told me made me feel bad about the thing I did. It's okay to say that. You move on through it. But if they don't know the impact they're having, and if they're fine with the impact they're having, then that's a whole other conversation. Until then, I'm going to keep doing what I do, which apparently is just encouraging people, co-signing everything I see, giving an impression, and giving people the platforms they deserve. I'll co-sign your creative project. Because why not? I have nothing to lose in encouraging somebody else to make something. I don't think they have anything to lose by making something. I'd love to know what you guys think. It's just a short one today, but build a safety group of people to co-sign, create, and hype their projects and their ideas and their ability to experience catharsis through creation. And we can defeat imposter syndrome. Maybe build a better community. I'll talk to you guys later.